economic development makes generational changes. And when you look at uh, making a plan, economic development doesn't happen by itself, right? We're not a silo. We encompass so many different aspects from public works and infrastructure to even police and fire, right? Create a plan. You have to execute the plan. You have to find partners who are willing to come in and invest in your community. The pipeline for economic development is massive and it funnels down just so thin.
Yeah, okay, the Gentry podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation. Knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Gentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello, and welcome to the Jentry Podcast today. We have an incredible guest. I'm your host, Jonathan Mason, but with me is Jimsi Kuborn. She is the Economic Development Director of Janesville, Wisconsin, and she brings a plethora of experience. She's worked from things like leading communities built on aerospace to different states and different cities. So I'm just very excited to have her, and I can't wait for you to learn about hers. But before we get started, Jimsi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I started at 6:45 this morning with Rotary, which is a blast.
Wow. So you've been ripping and running already. Well, I appreciate you being here, and I have to jump right into it as I always do. So what is the special sauce? What makes Janesville the best place to live in the United States?
It is the grit and the passion. Definitely the grit and the passion. We have very involved community with a lot of pride. Janesville is the park place for Wisconsin. We have 64 parks with a population of 66,000 people. Used to be the home of a former General Motors facility that closed in 2008. We lost 4 million square feet of industrial space, and this community has worked hard and diligently through a lot of investment in private and public partnerships to rebuild all of that industrial space. And we are moving forward, and our population is actually growing. We are a very passionate community, and I have an awesome location on the I-39, I-90 corridor and very close to Madison, Wisconsin, which is a really groovy place to be too. And it's a great location, a great place to live, work, play, raise a family. It's a very active community.
I love that, and I love the groovy place to live as well. That definitely made me smile, and I know that's coming from a place of you've had options. You've lived in multiple places. You've worked in multiple cities. So hearing how highly you speak of Janesville means a ton. But I've alluded to it multiple times already. Now I'd rather you speak to it. So growing up, did you always know you wanted to get into public service? What was your childhood like, and how did we get here?
No, when I was younger, I wanted to be a fashion designer. Oh, I actually studied more on the business and merchandising and marketing side, and started my career in retail management. Progressed into real estate. Worked in the title insurance industry in the early 2000s until, of course, the market crashed in 2008 and had to reinvent myself. It was super interesting. I had an attorney client of mine in 2007 who told me I could sell anything. I could sell a city. Fast forward about 7 or 8 years and got into economic development, was recruited by a former customer of mine who was a realtor who convinced me to apply for an economic development position in Rockford, Illinois area. And once I started doing economic development, it clicked. Oh my. I am selling cities. And I love it. I love sharing what is economic development, and I love speaking in front of college classes. And I always end my presentation the same way. Economic development makes generational changes to a community. And if you really want to make an impact on a community, economic development is really it. So I'm very particular about that.
Wow, no, I truly understand what you're saying. That long-term impact, you can shape cities, and
Mhm.
you can truly make a change. Now, on that note, what are some of the strategic priorities of Janesville when it comes to economic development in the future?
Gosh, one of our biggest strategies that we work on, of course, is the actual redevelopment of the brownfield site that was the former General Motors facility, right? We've rebuilt the square footage of industrial space, but throughout the community, the actual site is a 250-acre brownfield site that we're working through right now. We're working through a master redevelopment plan, and we're also running down the pipeline a couple of different possibilities and opportunities. And one of those, of course, is a data center, which has a lot of work associated with it and a lot of things that we're kind of working through, looking at the risk and rewards, the opportunities, and ways that that could possibly fit on that site due to the power capacity, the fiber capacity, and the additional infrastructure that exists. And having a partner who could possibly mitigate and remediate the entire site at their cost. So that's a big deal for us. There's a lot of work going around that opportunity and running through that to see if that does become something that's feasible and supported. Of course, Janesville does work on other industrial projects. The city of Janesville has been a industrial land developer for a long time. We utilize our tax increment districts and work through obtaining land, putting in the infrastructure, and promoting that and working with the developers to create industrial space. Definitely a key factor in how Janesville has rebuilt its industrial base. And then also housing's a big deal. Like everyone else, housing is a very, very big deal. And so we've been super creative in tax increment financing to partner with a few developers who have built approximately 600 units in about 5 or 6 years, 600 multifamily units.
Wow.
So
That
that's been a lot for us.
yeah.
Yes.
But just based on the size, yeah, that is very impactful. And I want to come back to housing later, but before I do, it sounds like you are doing quite a lot. And fortunately or fortunately, it sometimes feels like the call for leaders in municipalities is to do more with less, or to very strategically prioritize. Do you have any examples of where you've had to get innovative or scrappy or resourceful to yeah, I hear the laugh, so I'm guessing so.
Never. Us municipal people never have to be creative. You know, it's interesting. So I went in economic development from Rockford, Illinois to economic development in the San Antonio, Texas market. I worked for a suburban city called Converse, Texas, and now I'm here in Janesville, Wisconsin. I've also lived in Boise, Idaho. I know you've alluded to I've worked in different areas of the United States. And when I was down in the San Antonio market, I worked for a suburban city. I was hired to completely overhaul the economic development organization and activities for that community. That community had grown 65% in 6 years. Population growth, substantial, right? The one thing that was interesting is when I took that job, they were very transparent with me and they said, we have a referendum where there's a proposal to cut the economic development funding in half. And it did pass. And so I took the position knowing that the budget would be half of what it had been, but which was a super difficult thing to come in and do, and having to definitely cut a lot of the activities and prioritize what was the most expensive based upon the strategies and goals of the community. But we worked through that and prioritized and redid things. I even had one of my staff members redo our website. He took classes and courses and learned how to do that, right? How to redo our website, redo our marketing, work more at a regional capacity, working stronger with the city of San Antonio's economic development organizations. But yeah, we worked through it, figured out the budget with half of the budget, and actually ended up being able to pay off one of our bond obligations early. So by the time I had spent 3.5 years with Converse, Texas, I left the organization in a very different budgetary capacity, knowing that it could sustain its annual budget and obligations with paying off a bond and reprioritizing its efforts for economic development.
That's incredible. Going into the role knowing that your budget is gonna be slashed in half, but still having the courage and the resilience to not just take it on, but to succeed and paying bonds off early, and providing value to your taxpayers. Yes, that is innovative and scrappy, and I see where that laugh came from. Now you brought up another thing, you're ahead of the curve on everything that I'm thinking. You brought up working as a region or regionalization. How has that worked in Janesville? Have you thought about working with other people in your region? And I have to ask because I've heard both sides. Can you kind of give maybe some of the pros and the cons of trying to work on a regional level?
probably not a person who would say cons are a major component, right? I mean, it truly, you need to work at a regional capacity, right? You're most effective when you work regionally and don't compete against each other. We all exist, coexist. Someone who lives in the city of Janesville, it doesn't spend all of their time locked in the city limits of Janesville, right? And we succeed at regional levels, right? We succeed at larger municipal levels, MSA levels, right? When you even think about on a federal level on your comprehensive economic development strategies that you have to build on a federal level, right? Those are large regions. And for us, we're in the Madison region, which is about an 8-county region. We all succeed working together and not competing, not cannibalizing the other communities. We exist collaboratively. And so I'm a true advocate of that, always have been. And so for me, I truly believe we should work together. We had a project recently. I got a phone call from a broker, and he was representing a manufacturer in the town that's just south of us. And that manufacturer needed to expand, and they were unable to find the appropriate location in the time constraint that they had to continue their production and their expectations through their clients and their supply chain. And so the broker called me and said, "Hey, just I need your help. This is the manufacturer. They're in this, sister community. We've talked to the economic development director at that community. We can't find anything. What do you have?" And we did have the right fit for them. But of course, I picked up the phone. I called my colleague in the next city. "Hey, just to let you know, I got this phone call." And he was very well aware. And that's it, right? You being a partner, being a colleague, being transparent, and being respectful is vital. It's absolutely vital. And I've loved my opportunities for doing regional aspects, right? My first economic development position was a regional position. It was a private economic development organization that represented all of the communities in one county. And just informing people, being transparent, having those regular meetings, having those regular conversations, no matter how difficult they are. It's the focus on the whole region, the success of the region. And often the conversation is, it's not about me. It's not about my metric, right? Did I do this many business attractions? Did I create this many jobs? Did I create this much capital investment? It really comes down to, what does that client, what does that job creator, what is best for them? What are they looking for? What are the assets they need? The land, the water, the infrastructure, the roads, right? It's about them more so than it is about what my metric is.
Wow, that is very powerful how you speak of working together and how the focus should be on the entity that is creating the jobs, because that is employing the people and that is supporting your community. So I definitely love to hear that. When we think of doing more with less, we've talked about collaboration and working as a region. We've talked about sometimes just rolling up the sleeves and getting scrappy. Thing that often comes up is technology. Do you have any examples of tools that you think that have been very effective? And then my follow up: if you could create the tool that you actually need, what would that tool be?
On an economic development tool or a technology tool?
Man, focus on economic development in your job. But if you have something that's going to save the world in general, I'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, right. On an economic development tool, of course, one of the things that's going on here in Wisconsin is working through the possibility of creating a new tax increment district. And that new tax increment district is specifically targeted to single family development, right? Because currently, tax increment financing is utilized for multifamily type of housing development. It's a business structure, right? It's one entity that you're working directly with. But there is current legislation working through the state of Wisconsin to actually create a new tax increment district that's completely focused on single family housing development. And it would be a pay as you go TIF agreement, and specifically targeted towards the infrastructure cost associated with creating that new development project. And it would also discuss certain ceilings when it comes to lot size, the building, right, the actual house size, really trying to address some of the constraints with housing and costs for housing, right? Because now you're looking at entry level for new single family homes in the $400,000 range. And that's extremely difficult, even in, I mean, especially in the Midwest, right? We're not talking East Coast, West Coast, very different aspects. So those are some of the things that we're looking at doing. And a lot of times we talk about what we can do and what we can control internally. And for us, trying to think outside the box, trying to keep up with times, trying to be competitive. A lot of things we're doing right now is updating our zoning code and allowing for more density per square foot, right? Smaller lot sizes and different requirements and auxiliary dwelling units. We're trying really hard to be super creative when it comes to housing. I think we are super creative when it comes to what we do being an industrial land developer, right? By acquiring land, putting in the infrastructure and working with developers to create capital investment, industrial development, and job creation. So I know that there are other things that we could do, right? With different type of startup aspects. You see a lot of funds that are focused on educational aspects and helping entrepreneurs through, different training programs. I do think that there are opportunities where I would love to see more funds that are created at a state level that specifically focus on even small startup funds, right? So we've got so many entrepreneurs, especially who are looking in our downtown corridor. If there was just something as small as a $10,000, just a startup grant that they could utilize, right, to be able to set up their LLCs and to hire an attorney to work through different contractual obligations and maybe even do some additional marketing or advertising or help them get into leasing a space. That would be really neat to see something super creative.
Wow, yes, and I think you hit a lot of things from increasing the housing stock and bringing in new types of housing through creative incentive packages to increasing the amount of businesses. Like you spoke about industry and big industrial businesses, but there are smaller startups that want to work in downtown and want to create jobs as well. I think that's very important. Now, shifting to housing across the nation, sometimes we hear that there is a housing crisis. And I heard a little bit of it. You said we've done well in multifamily. Now we're trying to increase the single family. What does the housing stock look like in Janesville? Are there things outside of the single family that may be underbuilt or that you guys are going to be focusing on in the future?
Yeah, like many communities, right, we're missing housing options at most levels, right? So when you think about affordable housing or workforce housing, or you're thinking about market rate housing or the missing middle, right? We definitely are missing housing types of all classifications. I think with the 600 new multifamily units that have come online within the last 6 years for the city of Janesville, we're doing better when it comes to the multifamily opportunities because there was quite some time that we had a less than 1% vacancy rate in the city of Janesville for apartments for rent. And it's become super expensive. Interest rate changes. People aren't selling homes. There's not a lot of options for purchasing right now. And when we are seeing new subdivisions being proposed, some of them are in the $400,000 range, but some of them are in the $600,000 to $800,000 range. Larger homes that have a larger price tag and developers who can then make the numbers work for the costs associated with putting in the infrastructure. So we definitely need all types of housing, and we're trying to work through that. The city of Janesville, we have a separate fund that we utilize from our tax increment districts. So you can extend the life of your tax increment district and take the increment from that last year and put it into an affordable housing fund. And we are doing that, right? So this year we'll have 2 million that sits in that fund to try to assist with affordable housing development. So in addition to tax increment financing, there are affordable housing extension funds that we can offer as well for low income housing tax credits on a federal and state level. But it still continues to be a difficult project to move forward. The funding is just very difficult to make the ROI return for a developer to build. It's interesting if you think about how much it costs to construct a multifamily unit from what used to be, right? Maybe $150,000 to $175,000 a door. We're seeing these proposals come in from developers now where you're looking at 225,000. I've got someone who has sent me an application, and it's a very specialized, but it's $270,000 a door. It is extremely expensive to build multifamily. When you think about that on an affordable housing side, you have to be able to really address the funding requirements up front to be able to make that work. So it's a huge concern. It's something we're all continuing to work on, right? And trying to be super creative and share information and work through that.
You're ahead of the curve again. I was just gonna ask, have you heard anything, regionally or nationwide of any creative ways or incentives that people have done to increase some of that upfront cost, for developers that you've spoken of?
Yeah, I don't, besides the kind of the points I was have discussed, I think nothing super, super creative. I know for us, the single family housing thing for the state of Wisconsin is a big thing that could really make a difference for us to be able to help with the infrastructure for single family housing developments. I think some of the conversations I've even had at a state level, it's interesting to me that low income housing tax credits have this point system that actually has been, and I know there's talks about changing this, but the point system, you have higher points if you're in a lower income census tract. And for me, the conversation has been if someone can find a property, get the zoning, get the funding, and construct a development, why are there more points based on census tract? If you're going to build a comprehensive neighborhood and a developer can have all the other entitlements and all the other funding figured out, I just don't understand why there is a point increase, or there has been a point increase based on census tract. I think if you can find your site, it would be great to see the support wrapped around those housing tax credits because the project can be moved forward.
Wow, that is an interesting way to think about it, and I know it was a hard question.
No, it's okay. Those are also hard conversations to have too, right? I've asked that question, and I know that there are changes being proposed in Wisconsin to the low income housing tax credit structure, which is great. That's part of our responsibility as economic development professionals is to ask the hard questions and elicit that thought process and review. So more to come, hopefully.
Now, as I alluded to, we said that there's a housing crisis that looks so different across the nation. Like I've spoken to small mountain towns in Colorado, and they're landlocked. They're surrounded by the mountains, so they can only grow so far out. And now they're working on density. Then I've had other communities where they have a ton of land, but they're trying to, like you said, get the developers to be able to pencil those deals out. So what do you think are some of the reasons that have kind of gotten to the point where much more housing is needed?
Well, yeah, the housing constraints are cost, of course, right? Cost to the home buyer, cost to the developer, the cost of infrastructure, the cost of supplies and materials, the cost of labor. All of these costs continue to increase, is why it makes it much more difficult. And trying to figure out the different partners and how you can control those different aspects or help mitigate those different concerns, you have to work together to do that. For us, we have a position right now where we actually are sitting on 25 acres of land that's been sitting in a conservancy capacity. And so we've actually are working through a community driven initiative. We've hired a consultant who's working through building out new ideas and site plans and building that community feedback and community buy-in. And then we'll go out to an RFP to find a developer to do a mixed housing development opportunity on that 25 acres.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you have to figure out a way to mitigate the cost, to work with different people, to find different ways to unlock land for the developers. And that actually brings me to a separate question. Do you guys have a good amount of municipal land, or for the most part is the land already spoken for?
We do have land and we have capacity, and we have worked through, acquiring land and annexing land in. So for right now, we're working with this 25 acre for a mixed housing development opportunity, have approximately 20 acres on our far east side for industrial opportunities. Are kind of long and narrow lots. And then in 2023, We bought 132 acres of land, annexed it into the city. In 2024, I worked with our development team here at the city, and we put in most of the infrastructure on that land in 2024. And we got down to about 109 developable acres. And in 2025, I've already closed our first deal. So we've got a developer who is building two buildings at the total of 500,000 square feet. And it's speculative industrial. That developer has done a lot of development within the city of Janesville. And now we are running through several different prospects for the remaining portion of land. And the city, again, think outside the box. We're actually doing a partnership with our energy co-op to construct a new substation to be able to continue to develop out the rest of that land as well as the next 267 acres south of that.
Wow. So, again, doing more. I don't even wanna say with less, just doing more. It's impressive to hear how
Thanks.
much, you guys have been able to add to the land of the city and even, with some spec sites just preparing for, somebody to come in on, the industrial side. So that is very, very impressive. And it kinda dovetails nicely as you've been doing the entire time on infrastructure. How do you guys do you have any infrastructure needs and how do you guys go about addressing any infrastructure needs?
Oh gosh. Of course, we have our capital improvement plan and we work through a 5-year process, a timeline, and how to budget for those capital improvements that need to be done citywide. And then we also work with our tax increment districts and what we can project out for development opportunities and what is needed on the infrastructure side, right? So some of that infrastructure might be directly related to a specific project, or it could be infrastructure that benefits the entire district. Also, we write our project plans for each tax increment district to allow for half-mile expenditures, and those half-mile expenditures are for capital improvements for infrastructure levels, right? For the infrastructure itself that still positively affects that district. So super creative on that. One of the prime examples is our tax increment district downtown, and that is TID 36. That's a 27-year TID. It is a rehabilitation TID, which is why it's 27 years long. And when you create your financials for that district, for the life of that district, and look at the development opportunities and run the numbers on that, it doesn't run as a straight line as maybe some of the other districts. And the interesting thing in Wisconsin is that your blighted TIDs and your rehab TIDs, as long as they have the same taxing entities, there's capacity to do donations from one TID to another TID. So we've had some of our tax increment districts who have been hugely successful, and then we go back to our all of our taxing bodies who play a role in TIDs, right? So that's the city, the county, the technical college, and we have 2 school districts here, so it depends on where the land is. And we show that we can manage the finances through the district, that there's infrastructure requirements or other projects that we would like to do within a district, but we would like to be able to take the success from one and work it through the other. So our downtown TID has had several donations from other TIDs in the city that have done well. And so we have donated to downtown. What that has done is enable the city to do $21 million in downtown infrastructure improvements, which has been amazing for the city. It has really helped to show that the public sector is willing to invest first and the private sector comes in behind, right? It is a fiscal partnership and something that we try really hard to communicate with our stakeholders. So the city had this massive parking deck that went across the river. It was an eyesore. It wasn't anything super beautiful. Very utilitarian, right? But the structure was starting to fail and it needed to be taken down. And so the structure was taken down. There's now a substantially smaller bridge that goes across, and it's a walking bridge, and it creates connectivity from the east to the west part along the river. And it is really the core and the heart of our downtown. It's the core and the heart of our farmers market that happens on Saturday mornings. There's an amphitheater over there. There's this really cool little lawn space that you can do yoga on Monday nights, right? We've got a bubbler over there. We've got public art down there, live music all of the time. We have amazing downtown festivals that happen, from music to art to wine walks, Christmas events, right? Holiday things. It's really neat to see. And so with that, water improvements, street improvements, other bridge improvements, creating, these destinations, We've got areas of downtown that have ballards that come up from underground that so we can close off certain sections of the street for different events, festivities, bike races, and such. And it's been neat to see because the private sector has come in behind and invested substantially more in our downtown and our historic buildings, from retail spaces, office spaces, more livable units downtown on our second and third stories. We have somebody who just committed to redeveloping a five-story office building that has substantial amount of open space, and just to rethink that space. So we're seeing some really neat things going on downtown. And again, it's a fiscal partnership. It has to be public and private.
Well, you literally are, as a city, putting your money where your mouth is. It's impressive how you guys were able to create that donation structure from a different TID district or TID and able to donate that to another downtown and then really start to spur that investment. And I like what you said that the public sector will lead, but I know the private sector won't be too far behind once it is built out. And while we're focused on the private sector, one thing I like to focus on are those long term investments that are so important. And one of those is education and childcare. Speaking to economic development directors across the nation, workforce comes up. The ability of the workforce to have good schools, the ability of the workforce to send their children to adequate daycares and early childhood facilities. How has education kind of played into your job, and how has do you think Janesville been able to support education as a whole?
Yeah, I think for Janesville, we're super grateful because UW Whitewater has an extension here in Janesville. So we have a campus in the city of Janesville that's connected to the UW structure for statewide, right? And it's really neat because students can uh, go to school for the first 2 years, get their gen eds done, able to transfer to any of the UW schools, right? And it's around $6,000 a year to be able to do that. And so, as you know, right, costs are continuing to rise. And so, for the students who are graduating from high school to be able to continue to stay in their community, hopefully still stay connected, right, to the community, and be able to go to UW Rock County. Also, we have our technical college, so Black Hawk Tech, and they have over 80 different programs. A lot of them are wrapped around from manufacturing and welding and technology and healthcare, as well as emergency services. And they have two different campuses, one that's between Janesville and Beloit, and one in the Monroe area. And it's really neat to see they're making massive investments to continue to stay nimble and look at what the employers need in this area, not only on the traditional aspect and the traditional programs, but also working directly with employers, especially when we have new employers come in and building custom training for them. So Dr. Pierner runs a great organization with Black Hawk Tech. He's another person who truly thinks outside the box and is very nimble. And so we're super grateful to have those two different options, right? You've got your more traditional 4-year aspect, your technical college as well. And there are definitely opportunities in this community for trades or technology. We're not that far from Madison. For UW Madison, we have a lot of different education opportunities. So super grateful for that. Lots of flexibility. There are still opportunities, as with a lot of different communities, as technology changes and jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago that exist now, or jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago, right? If I could see, technology will do, that would be amazing. But we talk about that, especially when we have these conversations related to this data center opportunity, is what are jobs going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years? Because what used to be a slower pace on industrial revolution is an exponentially faster pace when you think about technological evolutions that we're going through now and how things will change substantially faster.
Wow. It sounds like education is at the core of a lot of what you all are doing, and having partners in the education sector that are forward thinking, that are thinking outside of the box, I know has to be a benefit when you're talking to different industries that are trying to come in. And you hit the nail on the head that the data center is further spurring artificial intelligence, and we do not know what that looks like as far as jobs for. I have a 19-month old. Like, I do not know necessarily yet what I should tell him to be looking into, but I definitely want to like you said, look at the people that are thinking outside of the box for some of those ideas. Now, speaking of out of the box, this next segment is our last chance games, and that comes from improv. So yes, and quick thinking. I don't want you to think about it. I'm going to ask you three questions. So just whatever comes to your mind, and then we'll circle back after those three. Then I have three more additional, and then we'll circle back after those three. So how does that sound, Jimsy? Okay, so they're not easy. What policy looks good on paper but is almost impossible to actually get done in actuality?
Paper. Oh my gosh. I think when we talked a little bit about the affordable housing aspects, right? There was a new policy that was built in Wisconsin a couple of years ago that it provided additional funding for affordable housing, but took out the opportunity to use TIF. Now they're having to look at changing it.
Okay. What role do you not have on staff that if you could invent or bring in would add to your productivity and success?
Oh gosh, I would just love to have another economic development professional with experience. My office is me, one other full-time person who does economic development. That's it.
Wow. So doing more with less was definitely true, but I don't want to throw us off. We'll circle back. What's the most common hidden development blocker? So zoning, utilities, public opinion. What is the most common blocker?
Most common blocker. Zoning's probably a big one, and funding, right? Getting a project to the numbers to work out.
There it is. So let's circle back to the first one. The most effective. You brought the TIF. Could you explain that and how you think that might be a little bit tougher in practice?
Yeah, the state of Wisconsin had made additional funding opportunities for affordable housing. And when they created this additional fund, the fund specifically stated that two things: the community to be able to qualify had to have made changes to its building code within the last year or two. Right. And so that's right, like an odd aspect, right? We all go through updates, but maybe not on the exact same time frame. And then the other one was you couldn't use the funds with TIF. So when you're looking at an affordable housing project, we already have so many financial constraints. And the idea is how do we help more? Not let's add a new program, but subtract one. So now our state legislators are looking at the lack of the utilization of that fund and the changes necessary to make that fund more usable and create more affordable housing units statewide.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Yes, if you're trying to help and make things more affordable and easier to actually get done, adding another hurdle and not allowing people to combine them does not sound like it is that will be the most effective. But I tip my hat to the state to looking and understanding. Okay, we have a lack of utilization. Why is that?
Yeah.
So that is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And okay, we have to go back to this. I started it, but wow. So there's only two people doing all those things that you spoke of in this podcast. Is that correct, Jimsy?
Yeah, so the city of Janesville, right? Our population's 66,500 people. We have 15 active tax increment districts. And I mean, for me, I've been here for almost 4 years. I've done probably $150 million in investments and I don't know, 25 million dollars in TIP incentives. There's a lot of projects going on. It's me. I'm a full-time staff member. I have an economic development coordinator who came more from the public management side. He's been with me for a little over a year, so he's still learning economic development. And then I have a part-time admin who really helps with the, invoicing, paying bills, agendas, schedules, notes, right? Uploading all these different things. She does a lot of that aspect. So it would be great to have another economic development staff member because I really wish I could do more outside, right? I spend a lot of time working in this seat on the actual right land development, land acquisition, looking at different projects, reviewing different TIF applications, working through different contracts. I spend a lot of time here, and in some of my other economic development positions, I spent a lot more time out. Right, being able to connect with the employers, getting to know more about what's going on in their business, and more interaction in the downtown, and working with our entrepreneurs. And I try really hard to explain that to people. Right? Don't be afraid to schedule time with me, even if you've got an idea, a business idea, right? I have time for everybody. So those are some of the things I would love to have another staff.
That makes sense. To first, lighten the load a bit, but then also get back to some of the core of the job that you appreciate, and that I'm sure that the members of your community appreciate. Oh, wow, I totally get that. Again, I tip my hat. Those are some impressive numbers coming out of a one and now two person team. Coming to the most common blockers with development, you said permitting was one, and also the financing, making deals pencil that you spoke of before. Anything else on there?
No, I think, people come in and zoning is always going to be a challenge, in working through those different processes, but funding is definitely a challenge too, right? We have seen borrowing costs get substantially more expensive. We've seen land costs go up and we've seen infrastructure. For us, that 132 acres that we purchased, as we go through the process of putting in the infrastructure costs had gone up 40% from the last time we had worked through a different area of our community and putting in infrastructure, right? So you build out these budgets and these plans and, working with public works and engineering. And we're like, wait, what? How much is that going to, right? You have this idea and you're focused and you're like, okay, here's the land acquisition cost. Here's the infrastructure cost, right? For your streets, your curbs, your gutters, your lights, your water, your sewer. We had to put in street signalization, new turn lanes off of the highway, right? Like there's all these different things you can plan for, but it's just gotten super expensive to do so, right? So now those land costs are substantially more expensive. So as we work through our different deals, that changes the numbers. So as much as I've had calls for smaller industrial inquiries for that land that we just launched off into a new industrial park, the smaller buildings don't work. The numbers aren't enough to offset the cost that we incurred for land acquisition and for infrastructure. So that land truly is a better opportunity for larger developments. When I get the calls from the smaller projects, I try to direct them to a couple of those small parcels I have on the far east side.
That totally makes sense, and the cost of the cost, and you need those economies of scale from sometimes a larger entity to make it work. So I get the hard part of prioritization. So we have three more questions.
All right.
Same rules. I will read them. You answer first in your mind, and then we'll circle back at the end. So the
Okay.
first one is: what is the hardest truth you wish residents understood about timelines and trade offs?
Economic development is a long game for sure.
I like that. I like that. Okay. What is the biggest long term risk you cannot fully solve in a 2 or 4 year election cycle?
Oh, what is the biggest one? But for right now, the biggest thing is our 250-acre brownfield site.
That's, yeah, that is a big one, but it sounds like you're thinking of ways to potentially utilize that. And the last question is actually a three-parter.
Okay.
What would you do with an additional $100,000 to the economic development budget? What would you do with an extra $1 million to the economic development budget? And then if you had unlimited money, unlimited staff, unlimited capacity for a year, what would you do with that money, and what challenge would you tackle?
100,000 extra staff, $1 million a downtown redevelopment of a building, and unlimited budget. I would tackle that 250-acre brownfield site myself. I'm gonna remediate it
Okay.
myself
All
and
right.
create a
Let
developable site.
Okay, let's work backwards on this one because I'm interested. So, what are you putting on that 250 acres? Obviously, you have to do all the mitigation and like FEMA type stuff. But then after that, what are you what are you doing?
Yeah. So of course, remediation aspect is working through Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources because it's a brownfield site. So the site has closure letters, but they have continuing obligations. And as soon as you take a shovel to that land, you have to come up with how you're going to remediate the contamination on the site, right? We have rough estimates of at least $30 million, but we know that once you break into a brownfield, it's like renovating your house, right? You open up the walls, there's going to be something else there. So in Wisconsin, there's two levels of cleanup. The two levels are industrial and non-industrial. So to be able to go in and clean all 250 acres to non-industrial use would be amazing because we're working through a master redevelopment plan of the 250 acres and working with the community. So it'd be really neat to be able to work through that planning process and then go, okay, by the way, it's clean. Now we can go develop. We don't have to wait. We don't have to look at grant funds. We don't have to look at any other resources, but how we move forward and how we create a mixed development opportunity that has the buy-in of the whole community. That site has been idle since 2008. So General Motors sold it to an entity in the end of 2017. The entity demolished and scrapped the facility and it has been sitting since 2018 scrapped, right? And so it is busted up concrete and busted up asphalt, and it sits in the middle of our city, and it makes what used to be an economic driver into an economic drain. And it would just be amazing to have no spending limit to be able to really launch that and really create a new epicenter and a new economic huge driver for our community.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, and I can imagine how excited you would be to be able to go to the community and say, "It's clean, we're ready to go. Let's talk through this. What are we doing?" So I like that. Now shifting to the $1 million, renovating something downtown. What would that look like?
We still have several buildings in downtown, right, that could use a little TLC and a little bit of love. So it'd be really cool to work with one of the building owners and figure out how to get it to full utilization, right? So a lot of the constraints wrapped around our second, third stories and such are fire suppression and new fire codes from when they were built to today, right? You start redeveloping something, you have new codes you have to be up to in fire code, and fire suppression is one of the big ones. But we've got a couple of really beautiful buildings that have gorgeous turrets or gorgeous facades, right? And it's just extremely expensive. And even trying to work through historic tax credit requirements really changes someone's budget. So a lot of our buildings are locally owned, right? It's not as though some big entity owns it. So it'd be really neat to be able to work with one of the property owners and put in $1 million to help reinvigorate some of our buildings to higher utilization.
Yeah, that is literally investing in your people. I love that it's locally owned. It's you're helping on two fronts. You're creating something for the community, but you're also empowering somebody to continue to invest in the community as their assets start to increase in value. And then the 100,000 I think is a little more straightforward.
Practical.
No, yeah, just some help, some help. I wish the same for you eventually. And then the 2 to 4 year was in line with what you said for the brownfield site, correct?
Yeah, the 2 to 4 year would be the brownfield site, right? And it's interesting that we're running kind of parallel paths right now, right? So our plan when we went through, so the city owns the site because we went through a purchase in lieu of condemnation due to blight. The site had been
Oh,
sitting in really bad shape, right? So like I had stated, General Motors had sold the site to an entity. That entity had scrapped the site, but the entity has let the site come to an aspect of busted up asphalt, busted up concrete. They weren't paying their property taxes. They weren't paying any of their city bills. It was becoming an issue, and the council had really started to prioritize with the city manager that we work through figuring this out. Like, how do we make this become an economic driver? It cannot continue as it stands. And so working through the acquisition process, knowing we had to build a master redevelopment plan, and that was always the plan, right? We had this conversation with council. This is what we're going to do: acquire. We're going to do a master redevelopment plan. We're going to try for some grants. One of the grants was an EPA assessment grant to help offset some of the costs associated with planning. And in my time that I've worked on this project for about 2 years through the acquisition and where we're at right now, I've applied for $30.5 million in grant funding and federal allocations. We just received notice last week that we are going to get a $5 million federal appropriation through Senator Tammy Baldwin, and we'll be able to use that for blight and brownfield aspects, not just GM Jatco site, the General Motors site, but at a community level. And that's, again, we're running these parallel paths. As we're working through this process, we started getting phone calls about data centers because The General Motors site has a substation across the street and has 3 lines of fiber that run around it. It has water capacity, and so there's so many different assets that are of interest to a data center user. The brownfield is the interesting part. I don't think data centers are generally seeking out brownfields. So we're trying to run through what that could look like, right? Because the substation's there, it needs increased capacity, but the station's already there, the easements are already there, the infrastructure has already started. And then this is an opportunity where the developer currently, the project that we're working through, the developer would take on all of the remediation costs. They're not asking for an incentive right now. We own our water utility, so we can mitigate the water issue. If we get into this process and get further down and get it approved, if we did a development agreement, we have the ability to state, right, water aspects. You can use this much water, right? So currently they're talking about 70 to 80,000 gallons a day. The former General Motors facility used over 2 million gallons of water a day. So there are different things that, we are working through with our community, hearing their concerns and things that can be addressed if the project moves forward. So it's an interesting time right now, right? Because you've got this 250-acre brownfield site, and we were ready to work through creating a master redevelopment plan, carving off small pieces, right? Subdividing it, working through different grant cycles and matching requirements, and working through multiple RFPs for developer partnerships, or maybe even one large master developer project, right? So the data center caught us off guard, and we're working through that, right? So there are different aspects to be worked through. So in Wisconsin, the power providers here have power agreements. The end user has to pay for all of the infrastructure upgrades. The end user has to pay for all the power delivered to them. And the end user has to have backstops for financing. They have to have additional letters of credit to provide security that it will get paid for and not by all the other residents, that those costs cannot be socialized in the state of Wisconsin. And then, yeah, we would work through water usage, site plans, green space, downward lighting, noise restrictions, all these different things, because it is a site that the city owns. So we're still working through that. We're very early in the stages of that. So we'll see if that moves forward. So we're running, like I said, parallel paths. We will work on this. We will figure it out. So
I mean, I love that, and that's how I like to live my life too. You gotta have plan A, but you gotta have plan B too, and whatever one works out best for the community, you go with that. But no,
yes.
I can definitely appreciate that. And before we wrap up, the last question that you said was, what was the hardest truth that the community doesn't understand on economic development? You stated that economic development is a long game. Can you elaborate on that?
It is a long game, right? One of the things I try to explain when I'm speaking in front of other people, right? The economic development makes generational changes. And when you look at uh, making a plan, right? We've got our comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan discusses the plan as the community, as the city, and economic development is a small part of that, because economic development doesn't happen by itself, right? We're not a silo. We encompass so many different aspects, from public works and infrastructure to even police and fire, right? You create a plan, you have to execute the plan. You have to find partners who are willing to come in and invest in your community. The pipeline for economic development is massive, and it funnels down just so thin, right? Like, a deal isn't done until it's constructed, right? You think you've got this project moving forward, and you've got, the zoning, you've got site plans, you've started with your certified survey map. It's not done until it's constructed. And so when we think even about like our downtown corridor, right? Like, it has been 10 years of that tax increment district and the efforts in downtown. 10 years. 10 years of the city working through what needed to be done on the infrastructure improvements and investments. These projects don't happen super quickly. I'm super grateful on the industrial park we bought in 23, put in the infrastructure in 24, and already have our first deal in 25. Like, that's fast. And, that's not necessarily the way things always work out, but that's why you create plans, right? You create plans so you have a pathway, always willing to be creative and flexible and pivot, but you create a plan and you work through it. And, making changes and growing and building your community is not something that is done in a year or two. It is not done in an election cycle. It has to be committed to long term. And I think one of the big things I try to explain to people too, right, is the public sector does not create jobs. It is our responsibility as the public sector to create an environment for our private sector to create jobs. So make those plans, work through them diligently, work with your private sector, and understand that these changes take time.
That, Jimsy, that's a great way to end up. It's the long game. It's the slow incremental change. It's the public sector creating the environment to allow the private sector to create jobs and thus create those jobs to support the community, and then the community will support you all. So I really appreciate this. You've shared some great insights. You've had some great answers to some questions off the top of your head, and then the longer thoughtful answers too. So Jimsy, on behalf of everyone here at Gentry, I'd like to say thank you, and to our viewers, I'd like to say thank you. And again, we've had Jimsi Kuborn, who is the Economic Development Director of Janesville, Wisconsin. And thank you all so much. Have a great one.
Thank